Okay, let's get into this. We are focusing today on a voice that really fundamentally shaped American humor and culture for, what, nearly 6 decades? Mel Blanc.
It's an incredible span of time.
It is. And he wasn't just a performer. He was quite literally the man of 1,000 voices.
And you really have to stop and register the sheer scope of that title.
Yeah.
When you look at the source material, you realize his professional life began during the earliest days of live radio.
Right.
And it extended right through to major cinematic releases in the late 1980s. His cultural reach it's just staggering, and his influence remains completely unbroken today.
So our mission here is to explore those source details, his surprising origins, the technical secrets behind that vocal genius, the critical contractual battles he fought and won.
And that's a huge part of it.
A huge part. He secured recognition not just for himself, but for all voice performers who came after. And then there's that almost unbelievable medical event where his characters, quite literally saved his life. It's a thorough look at professional resilience and, I think, artistic foresight.
Absolutely. If we start with the scope of that artistry, we have to acknowledge that Mel Blanc created the sonic foundation for one of the most recognizable brands in global entertainment. At Warner Bros., he originated the sound for an entire stable of characters that became global icons.
And we should probably list them because the breadth is truly astonishing. We are talking about the entire principal cast of Looney Tunes.
Almost all of them, yeah.
He created Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Tweety, Sylvester the Cat, Yosemite Sam, Wile E. Coyote, the Roadrunners, Speedy Gonzales, Marvin the Martian, Foghorn Leghorn.
The Tasmanian Devil, Pepe Le Pew.
The list just goes on.
And think about that for a moment, just that list. Most people associate multiple voices with multiple different performers across the studio's history. For Looney Tunes, one man was responsible for the core personality, the distinctive vocal cadence, and the catchphrases of over a dozen characters that defined the brand for generations.
It's truly easier to list the main Looney Tunes characters he didn't voice in the Golden Age.
Right. You have Elmer Fudd, who was primarily Arthur Q. Bryan.
And Porky's very first voice actor, Joe Dougherty, whom Blanc quickly replaced. But his talent went so far beyond the Warner Bros. Lot. Even after his exclusive contract expired, he anchored some of the earliest and most successful animated television shows.
His adaptability and his, market dominance during those crucial transition years, going from theatrical shorts to syndicated television.
Yeah.
It's undeniable. He defined characters like Barney Rubble and Dano the Dinosaur on the Flintstones.
And Mr. Spacely on the Jetsons.
Cosmo Spacely, exactly. He didn't just voice a few characters. He defined the sonic template for the entire genre across multiple rival studios for half a century.
Okay, let's trace this back. Where did that foundational talent come from? Mel Blanc was born Melvin Jerome Blanc in San Francisco in 1908. He spent his childhood there and later in Portland, Oregon.
And what's immediately clear from the sources is that this is not a talent that developed late in life. He began practicing voices and dialects when he was only 10 years old.
Just a kid.
Just a kid. He'd imitate people he heard on the street. He'd mimic radio performers. He was essentially teaching himself the mechanics of vocal variation from a very young age.
But the origin story includes one of the most powerful anecdotes about self-determination that we have in the sources, the literal changing of his name. He was born Blanc, B-L-A-N-K,
Right.
and he became Blanc, B-L-A-N-C.
This happened when he was 16. And the motivation for it just speaks volumes about his professional drive, even as a teenager. A high school teacher, seemingly unimpressed with the young Melvin, told him that he would amount to nothing and would be just like his name, a blank.
That's just a brutally dismissive thing for an educator to say to a creative kid.
It is a terrible thing to say. But rather than being crushed by it, he internalized it and weaponized it. He legally changed the spelling of his last name. By swapping that K for a C, he transformed a potentially derogatory label into the French word blanc, which means white.
It sounds more sophisticated, more professional.
Exactly. It sounded like a stage name for the era. He took a massive childhood insult and turned it into his enduring professional brand. It's an incredible story.
That decision really reflects the seriousness with which he approached his craft, even as a teenager. The sources mention he was also in community organizations like the Order of Demolay, which is a Masonic youth group.
Right, which indicates a strong early interest in community and maybe a certain kind of structure. And after graduating high school in 1927, he just dove headfirst into the performance world. He split his time across the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, Northern California, performing in vaudeville shows.
But he wasn't just performing voices at that point. He was leading an orchestra. At 19, he became the youngest conductor in the country. That shows a level of musical and rhythmic control that would become, well, essential for his later voice work.
That is the key connection, and it's often overlooked. Voice acting, especially for timed, theatrical animation, it requires perfect musical timing, pitch control, rhythm.
Of course.
A conductor has an innate understanding of tempo and cueing. His radio career officially began at 19, in 1927, on KGW's The Hoot Owls.
And this is where that talent for rapid-fire character switching was first really recognized as a unique, marketable skill.
Yes, he was a multi-character performer on a single program, and that started attracting professional attention beyond the local vaudeville circuit.
So he relocates to Los Angeles in 1932, marries Estelle Rosenbaum in 33, and then they actually move back to Portland for a bit.
Right, they co-hosted their own successful local radio show on KSX called Cobweb and Nux, starting that same year. But the career leap that brought him national visibility, the big one, was the Jack Benny program.
And that national platform was just enormous. He became a regular cast member starting in 1939 on the NBC Red Network, and he continued in that role until the program ended its radio run in 1955. And then he followed it into television.
He was a vocal utility player, a Swiss Army knife of sound, and he was absolutely essential to the show's entire sound design. He had named roles like the violin teacher, Professor LeBlanc.
A little nod to his own name.
Right, and the overly verbose train announcer, that was a classic bit.
Yeah.
He also voiced a polar bear named Carmichael and a recurring character called Cy, the little Mexican, who humorously only ever spoke one word at a time.
But the most famous and perhaps the most professionally defining of his Jack Benny roles, it wasn't human. It wasn't even an animal.
No, it was mechanical. It was Jack Benny's sputtering, perpetually broken down Maxwell automobile. And the story of how that sound effect became a regular character is a perfect illustration of Blanc's improvisational genius.
This is where we see the power of live radio in action.
Totally. The Maxwell sound, that signature sputtering, the backfiring, the rattling, the sound of an engine in existential crisis, that was originally supposed to be a pre-recorded sound effect, played on a transcription disc.
But on one critical broadcast, the recording just failed to cue up properly?
Correct. The moment arrived, and there was just silence where the sputtering should have been.
The dreaded dead air.
Exactly. In the tense environment of a live broadcast, the show couldn't stop. So Mel Blanc, seeing the predicament, instinctively stepped right up to the microphone and improvised the entire sequence of the failing automobile engine himself. He didn't just make a noise, he performed an entire miniature scene of a car fighting for its life.
And the audience reaction was immediate.
It was overwhelmingly positive. The immediacy, the imperfection, the sheer vocal artistry of Blanc's improvised sound. It resonated with listeners in a way a canned recording never could. Jack Benny, recognizing a gold mine, immediately discarded the sound recording. From that day forward, the sputtering engine became a permanent, unscripted role, a true character in the cast voiced by Mel Blanc.
What's fascinating is that this established him not just as a voice for characters, but as the source for sound itself. It blurs the line between actor and sound engineer.
That blurring is key. By 1942, his reputation was so well established that the trade magazine Radio Daily documented that Blanc specialized in over 57 voices, dialects, and intricate sound effects. He was essentially a one-man sound factory for the network, capable of generating entire acoustic landscapes on demand.
His ubiquity during the 1940s was immense. The sources show him appearing in supporting roles on over 15 national programs simultaneously. He was the happy postman on Burns and Allen, and he lent his skills to the war effort.
Right, voicing Private Sadsack in a series of World War II radio shows. The immense success and visibility he gained on The Benny Show eventually led CBS to give him his own program.
The Mel Blanc Show.
The Mel Blanc Show, yeah. It ran from late 1946 to mid-1947. He played a charmingly hapless fix-it shop owner. It was an attempt to make him a star in his own right, not just a supporting player. And though it was short-lived, it solidified his status as a major radio personality.
And this radio career, which demanded quick thinking, vocal stamina, and an encyclopedic knowledge of sounds, it was the perfect training ground for the massive shift that came next.
The big one.
In 1936, Mel Blanc made the career pivot that cemented his name in global history, joining Leon Schlesinger Productions, the independent studio that produced the theatrical Looney Tunes shorts for Warner Bros.
He officially joined the operation in December 1936. And his entry wasn't a starring role initially. His first contribution was in Picador Porky in 1937, where he provided the voices for Porky Pig's drunken friends. But his talent immediately positioned him for greater things.
He moved from supporting roles to defining the lead very quickly. In that same year, 1937, he replaced Joe Dougherty as the full-time voice of Porky Pig in the short Porky's Duck Hunt.
And that short is a massive dual milestone. Because while Porky was an established character, Porky's Duck Hunt simultaneously marked the debut of Daffy Duck, a character also voiced entirely by Blanc.
This immediately set the stage for the tremendous range he possessed. He could produce the nervous, high-pitched stutter of Porky Pig.
That's all, folks.
Right, and then immediately pivot to the manic, aggressively lisping and constantly complaining Daffy Duck. They represent two wildly different uses of the vocal mechanism.
And then, the character that would become synonymous with his name, the global icon of Warner Bros. Animation, Bugs Bunny. Bugs debuted in A Wild Hare in 1940, and Blanc's voice performance, that combination of a relaxed mid-Atlantic accent mixed with the confident street smarts of a New Yorker, was an instant hit.
So one of the most famous visual and sonic details of Bugs Bunny is the constant chewing of a carrot before delivering the iconic line, "Hey, what's up, Doc?" For listeners who want to know the technical craft behind the sound, how did he produce that incredibly realistic chewing sound over and over and then immediately deliver his lines so clearly?
Right. It was a very precise, fast, and frankly, unglamorous technique. To achieve that loud, crisp, crunching sound necessary for the microphone, Blanc would bite into a raw carrot. But if he tried to speak with the pieces in his mouth, the line would just be garbled and indistinct.
So he couldn't actually chew and talk simultaneously as the character appears to do.
Correct. The sound had to happen in that brief moment between the crunch and the line. So, immediately after biting down, Blanc would quickly spit the chewed carrot pieces into a spittoon kept right next to the microphone stand.
A spittoon?
A spittoon. Then he would deliver his line instantaneously, ensuring perfect clarity and timing. It was a rapid-fire sequence of bite, spit, deliver.
That's a fantastic detail, and we should clarify one of the long-standing myths that came from this. The idea that Mel Blanc was allergic to carrots.
Yes, that story has been repeated endlessly, but Blanc himself repeatedly denied it in interviews. He was eating carrots constantly for decades in the recording booth. He just couldn't keep them in his mouth to deliver his lines. The requirement was professional, not medical.
While Blanc defined most of the cast, we should briefly touch on Elmer Fudd again, who was primarily voiced by someone else during the Golden Age.
Elmer Fudd's famous voice was primarily the work of Arthur Q. Bryan, who gave him that distinctive, slightly nasal, was-to-Scully wabbit quality. Blanc did occasionally voice Elmer in earlier, less defined shorts, but Bryan was the mainstay. It wasn't until after the Golden Age, and specifically after Bryan passed away, that Blanc took over the role of Elmer Fudd for the compilation films and later specials.
Just to ensure continuity for the character.
Exactly.
Now, before he was locked down by that exclusive contract with Warner Bros., Blanc demonstrated his star power by originating another globally famous character at a rival studio, Walter Lance's Woody Woodpecker.
This happened between 1940 and 1941. Blanc originated that distinctive high-pitched voice and, crucially, the iconic maniacal laugh for Woody Woodpecker in the character's first 4 animated shorts.
So the voice and sound that defined Woody Woodpecker for years was actually a Mel Blanc creation.
Absolutely. However, his rising commitments and his exclusive contract with Warner Bros. Forced him to stop voicing Woody after those initial shorts. But his impact lingered. The sources confirm that Blanc's original iconic laugh recording was still used in Woody Woodpecker cartoons up until 1951.
A decade later.
A decade after he stopped voicing the character. And his famous signature line, "Guess Who?" was used in the opening titles until the series concluded in 1972. It was a signature he owned even if he couldn't perform it again.
And then the ultimate irony. His almost microscopic appearance at Walt Disney Productions, the ultimate rival studio of the era.
This occurred for Disney's 1940 animated feature film, Pinocchio. Blanc was hired to provide the voice of Gideon the Cat, one of the sidekicks to Honest John.
A speaking role, right?
It was intended to be, yes.
Yeah.
However, during production, Disney decided to make Gideon mute, similar to the character Dopey in Snow White. As a result, all of the dialogue Blanc recorded for Gideon was deleted from the final film.
All of it. Did
Yeah.
anything remain?
Just one solitary vocal effect. Due to a character movement or an improvised moment, 3 isolated instances of Gideon's voice, a single hiccup, are heard in the finished 1940 film.
A single hiccup, 3 times.
That's it. That one hiccup remains Mel Blanc's total credited vocal contribution to a Disney feature film during the Golden Age. It's an amazing piece of trivia considering the scale of his other work.
Okay, so once he had secured his place as the artistic foundation for an entire studio, his focus shifted from artistry to ownership. We need to turn to the battle for recognition, which is arguably his greatest professional contribution to the entire voice acting industry.
This is a critical point that is often missed when discussing his talent. Voice actors at the time, they were treated as technical staff, sound technicians, or just uncredited utility players. They were performing specialized labor, but were not afforded the professional standing of credited actors. No residuals, no long-term rights. Professional anonymity was the industry standard.
And this system fundamentally disregarded the artistic value of the performance. If you created the voice of Bugs Bunny, the studio believed they owned that sound, and you were just the person who made the noise for them.
Exactly. But Blanc was keenly aware of the value of his unique artistry. The source material shows he was relentless in protecting the contractual and legal rights to his voice characterizations. He made it clear he would pursue civil action whenever those rights were infringed upon.
So how did he break that entrenched industry standard? The sources detail a specific contractual stipulation he leveraged, transforming the economics and recognition for all future voice actors.
The mechanism was a direct confrontation over pay. By 1944, having already established himself as the voice of Bugs, Daffy, and Porky, Blanc felt he deserved a salary increase from the studio boss, Leon Schlesinger. When the studio denied him the raise, Blanc shifted his demands.
He traded a salary bump for professional credit.
That's precisely what he did. He secured a contract clause mandating that he receive on-screen credit. The stipulation read specifically, "Voice characterizations by Mel Blanc." This was a monumental win because it was the first consistent on-screen credit granted to a voice performer in the history of the industry.
Why was the phrase voice characterization so important? Why not just voices by Mel Blanc?
The word characterization was strategic. It legally elevated his contribution from simple sound effects to a recognized artistic performance. It implied that the voice was the character linking the human performer directly to the intellectual property in a way that had never been acknowledged before.
Initially, this credit was only granted for cartoons featuring Bugs Bunny, his most popular character at the time.
Correct. But once that precedent was established, he quickly extended it. By March 1945, the contract was expanded to include shorts featuring Porky Pig and Daffy Duck. And finally, by the end of 1946, he achieved full parody. He received screen credit in any subsequent Warner Bros. Cartoon, for which he provided voices, regardless of which character was starring.
This achievement cemented him not only as the most prolific performer, but as the first recognized voice actor. He set the precedent that voice work was an art form deserving of recognition and compensation, which would define union and contractual rights for generations that followed.
It was a professional masterstroke that elevated an entire craft.
This incredible career, built on legal foresight and vocal genius, was nearly cut tragically short in 1961. We need to slow down the pacing here and focus on the drama and medical detail of this event.
This happened on January 24th, 1961. Blanc was driving his sports car alone on Sunset Boulevard, approaching a notorious bend in the road locally known as Dead Man's Curve.
An ominous name.
Very. He was involved in a severe head-on collision.
The resulting injuries were extensive and life-threatening. He suffered severe fractures to both legs and his pelvis, and critically, the trauma left him in a deep coma.
Right. He was completely non-responsive for approximately 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
His doctors were gravely concerned. They were trying every known technique to elicit a response, to find some sign of consciousness or neural activity, but all the conventional methods failed.
This is where his professional life intersected with his medical treatment in a way that sounds almost like a scene from a cartoon, but it's documented fact. A neurologist at the UCLA Medical Center decided to attempt a wholly unconventional approach to bypass the physical trauma and reach his brain.
The doctor hypothesized that the characters Blanc created might represent a deep, separate, and perhaps more accessible pathway in his brain than his own personal identity, Melvin Blanc. So the neurologist stopped addressing the patient as Mr. Blanc.
And what did he do instead?
He spoke directly to the characters. The doctor leaned over the bed and asked, "How are you feeling today, Bugs Bunny?"
After 2 weeks of total silence, what was the response?
According to the source material, after a significant pause, Blanc responded weakly, but clearly and perfectly in character. "Hey, just fine, Doc. How are you?"
That is an extraordinary moment of breakthrough. The sheer emotional weight of hearing that voice after days of silence must have been just Overwhelming.
It confirmed the doctor's hypothesis.
Yeah.
So to test the robustness of the response, the doctor then asked if Tweety Bird was there as well.
Hmm.
The immediate in-character reply was, I taught a putty tat. This communication, retrieved through the characters, was his first true sign of consciousness and is directly credited as the pivotal moment that broke him out of the coma, allowing him to begin his long physical recovery.
So once he had stabilized and returned home on March 17th, Blanc leveraged the incident not just for his own healing, but for public safety, which shows his continued civic engagement.
He filed a substantial U.S. $500,000 lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles. And this wasn't just about personal damages. Blanc specifically highlighted that his collision was one of 26 serious accidents that had occurred at that single dangerous intersection, Dead Man's Curve, in the preceding 2 years alone.
So he used the gravity of his own nearly fatal accident and his public platform to force municipal change.
Exactly. The resulting public outcry and legal pressure were undeniable. This forced the city to fund and complete a massive public works project, resulting in the restructuring of the curves at that location, making it significantly safer. He didn't just survive the crash, he literally changed the road.
Despite the severity of his injuries and the extensive recovery, his work had to continue almost immediately. At the time of the collision, he was the essential voice of Barney Rubble in the Flintstones, which was one of the most popular shows on television.
His absence had to be managed, but it was remarkably brief. Daws Butler, another legendary voice actor who created characters like Yogi Bear, briefly filled in as Barney for a few episodes. However, the show's producers, knowing how vital Blanc's voice was, devised an ingenious and highly committed solution.
They brought the studio to him.
They did. They set up professional recording equipment directly in Blanc's hospital room in UCLA, and later, once he was stable enough, at his home. The dedication to maintaining continuity was absolute.
Try to picture that scene for our listener. An entire recording session, typically done in a professional sound booth.
But happening in a hospital room. The source material confirms that some of these recordings for the Flintstones were made while Mel Blanc lay flat on his back, immobilized in a full-body cast. His co-stars, Alan Reed, who played Fred Flintstone, and Bea Benaderet, who played Betty Rubble, would gather around him, recording their lines while he performed Barney Rubble from his hospital bed. That level of professional commitment is virtually unmatched.
And the sources also reveal the high regard in which his peers held him, specifically regarding his Looney Tunes roles.
Right. Warner Bros., needing to plan for contingencies, approached Stan Freiberg, another hugely talented voice artist, to temporarily provide the voices for Bugs Bunny and Porky Pig. Freiberg publicly declined the offer.
Why refuse that kind of career opportunity?
Out of profound professional respect. Freiberg stated he would not step into those roles while Blanc was in recovery, acknowledging that those voices were inextricably linked to Blanc's identity and his genius.
Though he declined the main roles, we know some temporary work was necessary for minor technical touch-ups on existing shorts.
That's correct. Mel Blanc's son, Noel Blanc, later revealed that he, in fact, performed some of his father's Warner Bros. Characters for looping specific extra phrases or single words into certain cartoons that needed minor revisions during the height of his father's recovery period. It was a temporary, necessary measure to keep the production moving without violating the integrity of the voice.
So once he recovered, the animation landscape had changed entirely. His exclusive contract with Warner Bros. Had expired, and the medium had moved decisively toward television animation. This freed him up to become the dominant voice across the expanding industry.
This inaugurated his major tenure with Hanna-Barbera. While he continued to record for Warner Bros. And compilation films, he strategically transitioned to the most commercially viable animation medium of the time. He provided voices for a vast array of Hanna-Barbera shows, cementing his roles as Barney Rubble, Dino the Dinosaur, and, of course, Cosmo Spacely on the Jetsons.
It was a brilliant move, positioning him in the new wave of syndicated television rather than the declining theatrical shorts market.
It secured his commercial relevance for the next 2 decades. And beyond those foundational characters, the volume of his supporting work was immense. He voiced Sequel Squirrel, Speed Buggy, Captain Caveman, and became a fixture in the commercial world as Toucan Sam for Fruit Loops.
A character he voiced for over 30 years.
An incredible run. And while he was dominating the artistic landscape, he was also extremely savvy commercially. In 1962, shortly after his accident and recovery, Mel and his son Noel formed Blanc Communications Corporation.
This wasn't just a vanity project. It was a highly sophisticated and successful media company specializing in sound and voice production. They produced voiceovers, custom sounds, and commercials. over 5,000 commercials and public service announcements in total. Remarkably, this corporation remains in operation today.
That's right. The success of the communications company brought him into contact with a variety of huge stars for commercials and PSAs, highlighting his status as a major media player. We see him working with figures like Lucille Ball, Kirk Douglas, Vincent Price, Liberace.
And he even provided voice direction for the band The Who. He truly crossed every media boundary available.
In the 1970s, he branched out further into live educational appearances, capitalizing on his fame by giving a series of college lectures across the U.S., teaching the technical craft of voice performance. He also appeared in national commercials for brands like American Express, demonstrating his willingness to use his own recognizable voice and persona to build his personal brand beyond the animated world.
And he maintained his Golden Age ties. He worked with former Looney Tunes director Chuck Jones, who directed the Tom and Jerry shorts from 1963 to 1967. Blanc provided many of the vocal effects for those shorts.
And he kept the core Warner Bros. Characters current by voicing new dialogue for major compilation films, ensuring continuity in the new era. Films like the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner movie in 1979 and Daffy Duck's Fantastic Island in 1983 all relied on his voice. And as we mentioned, he permanently assumed the primary role of Elmer Fudd for these features after the original voice actor's passing.
His final major original character creation was Heathcliff, the cat, who he voiced from 1980 to 1988. But a massive bookend to his animation career came in 1988 with the groundbreaking live-action animated film Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That film was a technical milestone for animation, bringing together characters from rival studios. In it, Blanc reprised 5 of his core Warner Bros. Characters: Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Tweety, and Sylvester.
And the significance of this cannot be overstated. Roger Rabbit was a major Disney production. This meant that Blanc was simultaneously working for his primary studio rival, marking one of the very few occasions he collaborated directly with Disney, a long way from the 3 isolated hiccups he recorded for Pinocchio nearly 5 decades earlier.
He died just a year after Roger Rabbit's release. His final recording session was for his long-running television character, Cosmo Spacely, in Jetsons, the movie. That film was released posthumously in 1990 and was dedicated in his memory, truly marking the end of a vast 60-year career.
Now we should turn to the personal details and, crucially, the physical reality of his unique talent. Mel Blanc and his wife Estelle Rosenbaum were married in 1933, a union that lasted until his death in 1989. Their son, Noel Blanc, followed his father's professional path, becoming a respected voice actor himself.
We also gain insight into his community roots. He was deeply affiliated with the Freemasons, maintaining a 58-year membership with Midday Lodge No. 188 in Portland, Oregon, demonstrating a long commitment to structure and community. He was also a Shriner.
But the sources reveal that the true physical genius of his voice was backed by unique anatomical capability. A doctor who examined Blanc's throat made a fascinating and unexpected comparison.
The doctor found that Mel Blanc possessed unusually thick and powerful vocal cords. The sources claimed this physiological advantage gave him exceptional range, allowing him to shift rapidly between high-pitched chirps and deep, gravelly bellows. The doctor compared the structure and power of his cords to those of the legendary opera singer Enrico Caruso.
To put that into perspective, he had the vocal cords of an opera star, but he was using them to voice a nervous pig and a lisping cat.
Exactly. That anatomical capability meant he could handle the enormous variations in vocal strain that his repertoire required, moving instantly from a mild, casual conversational tone to a grating, high-volume shout without physical damage.
And Blanc himself detailed the tremendous difference in physical effort between his characters. Which character did he deem the easiest to voice?
Sylvester the cat. Blanc described it as requiring the least amount of effort, stating that Sylvester's voice was essentially just my normal speaking voice with a spray at the end, referring to the distinctive lisp, which was not physically taxing.
And what about the most difficult, the most physically demanding?
Yosemite Sam Blanc named him the hardest character, purely due to the necessary loudness, the aggressive tone, and the constant grating raspiness he had to maintain for the character's shouts. That required maximum air displacement and forced vocal friction, which is physically exhausting to sustain.
It is noted that this high-volume work, combined with a lifelong personal habit, contributed significantly to his eventual decline and death.
Blanc was a heavy smoker. The sources reveal he smoked at least 1 pack per day, starting a habit when he was only 9 years old and continuing until 1985. He finally quit after being diagnosed with emphysema, a chronic lung disease.
But the damage was long-term.
Unfortunately, yes. He later developed chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, a progressive respiratory disease, and eventually suffered from advanced coronary artery disease. He died from complications related to these respiratory and cardiac illnesses in 1989.
His loss was a profound moment for the industry, marking the end of the voice that had defined an entire generation of animation. As we discussed, his reputation rests on two pillars: his prolific volume of work and his status as the first voice actor to successfully receive on-screen credit.
The collective sense of loss was captured beautifully in a famous tribute lithograph titled Speechless, drawn by Daryl Van Sitters. It showed a spotlight shining on a microphone stand, while all the main Looney Tunes characters, including Bugs, Daffy, and Porky, stood somberly, bowing their heads in a collective moment of silence.
But the truly enduring element of his legacy, the thing that ensures his voice transcends his physical lifespan, is the incredible initiative he started himself, the Warner Blanc Audio Library.
This library was formalized by his estate in Warner Bros. In 1994 and consists of 550 songs and voice recordings of his Looney Tunes characters. What makes this initiative so astonishing is that Blanc began setting down these recordings in his personal multi-track studio as early as 1958.
Why that level of foresight? What motivated him to archive his own work so meticulously over 30 years before his death?
He was driven by a fear that he wouldn't be able to record in the future, either due to the inevitable decline of his voice or physical incapacitation. A fear realized just 3 years later with the accident. He wanted to ensure that the unique character voices he created would live on, regardless of his own ability to perform.
That is just unparalleled professional planning. And this audio library continues to expand and be utilized thanks to a discovery in the 1990s.
Yes. In 1996, 15 hours of previously undiscovered archival tapes of Blanc's material were found. His son, Mel Blanc, confirmed that using modern digital technology, they can actually manipulate and rearrange existing syllables from these vast recordings.
So they aren't just playing old clips of Bugs Bunny saying, "What's up, Doc?"
No, they are essentially creating a sophisticated vocal synthesizer using his own recordings. They can program his existing sound files and rearrange those syllables to create entirely new, custom dialogue for the characters. This means the characters can say things Mel Blanc never recorded, but it is still authentically his voice.
That is the ultimate renewable vocal legacy. His voice can be utilized for new custom dialogue in video games, talking watches, commercials, new media, ensuring that the original soundscape is maintained.
We saw early examples of this technology being utilized. Archival recordings of his voice as Dino the dinosaur were used in live action. The Flintstones films in the 1990s and 2000s, and recordings of his iconic Maxwell car sound were featured in the 2003 film Looney Tunes. Back in action, his voice is perpetually recycled and renewed.
And as a final, definitive, and perfectly fitting signature to his life, his will specified the inscription for his memorial marker in Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
His will mandated that the marker read the iconic farewell phrase associated with his long-running supporting character, Porky Pig. That's all, folks.
It's a perfect, humble sign-off for a giant of the medium, delivered through one of his most beloved voices. We should also note that he remains celebrated on the Hollywood Walk of Fame with his own star, and fittingly, his most famous creation, Bugs Bunny, also received his own star in 1985.
So if we summarize all the sources we've examined, we see that Mel Blanc's legacy is defined by a powerful convergence. His innate vocal genius, backed by unique biology, the rigorous discipline and improvisational skill he honed during the golden age of radio, his legal and contractual foresight in demanding credit and securing ownership, and finally, his scientific planning in creating that comprehensive, living audio library.
He ensured that the soundscape of classic American animation remains inextricably linked to him, transcending his physical lifespan and securing his place in every new medium that arrives. The immense technical and artistic burden and the unique professional responsibility it places on one individual to single-handedly define the entire personality, humor, and sound of a global cultural phenomenon like Looney Tunes is staggering to think about.
His work didn't just entertain millions. It fundamentally elevated the perception of voice work, from simple disposable sound effects to recognized, credited, and celebrated artistry. It compels you to think about the lasting power of sound and how often we overlook the single person who defines an entire generation's memories through their voice alone.
That's a powerful thought to leave you with.
Thanks for listening.